A very good evening to everyone and welcome to the 12th edition of the Penguin Annual Lecture. We're very glad that you all chose to spend time with us and we're looking forward to an enriching evening ahead. I am Pallavi Narayan, the host for the evening, and glad to present the Penguin Annual Lecture for 2018. And without any further delay, I would like to invite our CEO, Mr. Gaurav Srinagesh, to open the lecture.
This really richness of ancient Indian sort of philosophy.
Attending Penguin Annual Lecture 2012.
And what comes to mind again and again is an image of my father.
The role played by Gandhi in the earlier phase was played by Nehru. He was the fulcrum, the catalyst.
First of all, thank you all for coming out tonight. It is an absolute thrill to be here.
He's this very strange-looking character. He's got big ears and a big nose.
I think that there are amongst you many who are aspiring writers.
Don't let anyone or any situation dictate to you who you are and who you can be.
Thank you, Pallavi, and good evening, everyone, and welcome to this fabulous event. This is just absolutely awesome. I just don't have words. We were expecting a few, but this is more than a few hundred than we were actually catered for. Sorry for the inconvenience that might have been caused to some of you on the outside, but I'm sure you'll appreciate that safety is of utmost concern. And thank you again for your patience. Just before I begin, when we do complete the lecture, there are going to be 3 exits. There's 2 here, and there's 1 here. So please leave slowly, right? At the outset, again, as I said, welcome. It's our 12th edition, and we're very, very excited that you all could make it here on a Sunday evening. Before we begin, I'd like to thank the team that has actually put this together. Many, many hours, many, many heartaches, a lot of stress, a lot of tension, but I think the proof is in the pudding. It's a fabulous effort. The team at Landmark, my special thanks to you, your patience, your professionalism. You spent a lot of time to ensure that in today's day and age, you take our books to you, the readers, and for that, we're extremely grateful. To the production team, Faisal and team, who spent quite a bit of time putting this together. To Professor Harari's team, who worked with us extremely efficiently and professionally for many, many weeks. And we're glad we were finally able to pull this off. The team at the Taj, thank you very much for bearing with us for today. Shobha, thank you so much for everything. And last but not the least, my fabulous team at Penguin Random House India. You guys are legends and keep up the great work. We've been doing this now for, as I said, the last 11 years, and this is the 12th. And the purpose of the Penguin Annual Lecture is to give everyone, or rather to give voices for people to understand what the issues are. And these could be varied. It could be from debates around justice to politics to just to smile from learning from the Dalai Lama. And our objective is to ensure that the great minds that we have are in a position to share some of themselves with you during the course of the evening. Today, we are absolutely delighted, thrilled, ecstatic to have Professor Yuval Harari with us. Thank you for... Come on, we can clap louder than that. He needs absolutely no introduction. He's globally renowned, award-winning historian, and we're very much looking forward to having him with us for the next 70 minutes. He holds a PhD from the University of Oxford. He currently lectures at the Hebrew University of Jerusalem. He has won numerous awards, most notably the Polanski Prize for Creativity and Originality. His 2 books, 3 actually, all published by Penguin Random House. I do hope you read them. If not, please walk to the back at the end of the evening and make sure you pick up copies. We also have signed copies. I had to say that. His 2 books, Sapiens, A Brief History of Mankind, and Homo Deus, A Brief History of Tomorrow, are global bestsellers, selling over 12 million copies globally, and they've been translated into 45 languages as I currently speak. In 2017, Homo Deus was awarded the Handelsblatt's German Economic Book Award for the most thoughtful and influential book on economics for the year. And his most recent book, 21st Lessons for the 21st Century, is a probing and visionary investigation into today's most urgent issues. And as we all know, we have quite a few of them. Professor Harari regularly lectures around the world and has written for The Guardian, The Times, The Financial Times, The Wall Street Journal, and a lot many others. And in spite of his extremely hectic schedule, he has taken the time to be with us. Thank you very much, and without further ado, may I give you Professor Harari.
Thank you. So hello, everyone. It's a pleasure and an honor to be here. And I want to use the opportunity to talk about the new challenges that will face all of us, all humans, in the 21st century. But before exploring the new challenges of this century, perhaps it would be a good idea to start by saying a few words about the old challenges and about the amazing achievements of our species, Homo sapiens, over the last century, because this may give us hope that we can overcome the new challenges as well. And when we look back at the last few generations, at the last century, perhaps the biggest achievement of humankind has been to overcome famine. Because for the beginning of history, for thousands of years, famine was humanity's greatest enemy. Most humans always lived on the brink of starvation. This was because humanity was simply unable to grow and distribute enough food. So every few years, there would be a natural disaster, like a flood or a drought, and millions of people starved to death. Today, in contrast, humanity grows so much food, it can transport it so quickly and so cheaply, that in most countries, even in developing countries, more people die from eating too much than from eating too little, which is really an amazing achievement. We can indeed say that natural famine has completely disappeared from the world. Natural famine is famine caused by natural forces, like floods and droughts. The only famine that still remains in the world is political famine. If people still starve to death in places like Yemen and South Sudan and Syria and many other countries around the world, it is not because humanity no longer has the power to feed them. It is only because some government or some politician or some ideology wants these people to starve to death. The second big achievement of humankind has been to overcome plagues and infectious diseases. Today, for the first time in history, more people die from old age diseases like cancer than from infectious diseases. 1,000 years ago, people rarely died from cancer. Not because people lived such healthy lives and ate such healthy food, but simply because most people died at a far younger age from either starvation or from some infectious disease and did not live long enough to die from cancer. But the third and maybe most surprising achievement of humankind over the last few generations has been to rein in and overcome war and violence. In the past, humans thought that war was simply a natural part of this imperfect world, and perhaps only God someday, through some miracle, might bring peace to the earth. But in the last few generations, humans have discovered that we actually have the power to bring peace to the world by ourselves. We don't need to wait for any miracle. We just need to make the right decisions. And the last few generations have indeed been the most peaceful era in human history. It may not look like it when you read the news, but we are still, even in 2018, living in the most peaceful era in history. There are still wars in some parts of the world. I come from the Middle East, so I know this perfectly well. But many states have completely renounced war as a standard tool to achieve their political purposes. And in fact, when you look at the statistics, an amazing fact emerges, which is that today, and for the last few decades, more people commit suicide than are killed by violence, by crime and war and terrorism put together. Statistically speaking, you are now your own worst enemies. The chances that you will kill yourself are significantly higher than the chances that you will be killed by some soldier or criminal or terrorist. Another interesting statistic, maybe to think about during your next lunch or dinner, is that sugar is today a far greater threat to your life than gunpowder. So these have been the amazing achievements of our species in the last few generations. What then will be the next challenges of the 21st century? And we see before us now three main challenges: the return of war, ecological collapse, and technological disruption. The first threat is that war will simply return. As I just said, war declined in the last few decades, not because of any change in the laws of nature, and not because of some divine miracle, but simply because of wise human decisions. And if humans now start making unwise decisions, war will return, and in an even worse form than we ever encountered before. And we should never underestimate human stupidity. It is one of the most powerful forces in history. Yes, human wisdom is very great and important, but human stupidity has throughout history almost equaled human wisdom in shaping the fortunes of our species. And especially when it comes to war, there is a built-in imbalance between wisdom and stupidity. It takes a lot of wise people in order to make peace, but it is sometimes enough to have just one fool in order to start a war. So this is the first challenge. The second challenge we are facing is ecological collapse. And whereas the threat of global war is just a future possibility, climate change is a present reality. It is happening all around us. And if we don't do something, then the place we are now sitting might be under the Indian Ocean in 50 years. To prevent catastrophic global warming and climate change, we need to do two very difficult things. First of all, we need global cooperation on this, because it should be obvious that no nation can stop climate change by itself. The government of India cannot save Mumbai by itself unless it cooperates on this with the governments of China and the USA and Europe and so forth. The second thing that we need is new eco-friendly technologies, because I think the sad truth is that with present-day technology, the only way to stop climate change is to stop economic growth. And this is something that no government, or almost no government, will agree to do. Because the number one value of almost all governments and all countries today in the world is economic growth. They can call themselves by whichever name they want. They can call themselves socialists or capitalists, democratic or authoritarian, Hindu or Muslim or Jewish or secular, it doesn't matter. The number one value is economic growth. And therefore, the only realistic hope of stopping climate change is to develop new eco-friendly technologies that can sustain economic growth without destabilizing and destroying the ecological balance. But this reliance on technology, of course, leads us to the third and most complicated challenge we face, which is the challenge of technological disruption. To make a very long story short about what technology is doing and will be doing in the 21st century, we can say simply that technology is now upgrading humans into gods. This is the big story of our era. And I mean this in the most literal sense possible. We are now being transformed into gods in the sense that AI, artificial intelligence, and biotechnology will soon give us abilities which ancient mythologies ascribed to the gods, especially the ability to create life. We will soon learn how to design and manufacture life, how to design and manufacture animals and plants and humans and even completely new life forms that never existed before. The main products of the 21st century economy will not be textiles and vehicles and weapons and so forth. The main products will be bodies and brains and minds. And if this indeed happens, it will be the greatest revolution, not just since the beginning of history, 70,000 years ago. It will actually be the greatest revolution since the beginning of biology, the beginning of life, 4 billion years ago. For 4 billion years, nothing fundamental changed in the basic rules of the game of life. For 4 billion years, all of life was governed by two sets of laws, the laws of natural selection and the laws of organic biochemistry. All of life, whether dinosaurs or amoebas, whether tomatoes or Homo sapiens, were made of organic compounds and evolved by natural selection. But within the next century or two, science will replace natural selection with intelligent design as the main engine of evolution. The intelligent design, not of some god above the clouds, but our intelligent design will determine the future of life. And at the same time, science might enable us to start creating the first inorganic life forms after 4 billion years of organic evolution. And the big question we face is what to do with these divine powers of creation. And if we make mistakes, these will be mistakes on a cosmic scale. We will determine the entire future of life and evolution. We should come to terms with the fact that we are now becoming the gods of planet Earth, but so far we have been very irresponsible gods. And maybe our main problem is the gap between our power and our wisdom, between the power to manipulate systems and the wisdom needed to really understand these systems deeply. Unfortunately, it is usually much, much easier to manipulate than to understand. For example, it is much easier to build a dam over a river than to understand all the consequences this will have for the animals, the plants, the ecological system, and so forth. And therefore, throughout history, humans usually start manipulating things long before they understand the consequences of their actions. Now, in the past, we humans have learned to manipulate the world outside us. We learned how to control the rivers, the animals, the forests, and because we didn't understand the complexity of the ecological system, we misused our power, we unbalanced the system, and now we face an ecological collapse. In the 21st century, the big change will be that we will learn how to manipulate not just the world outside us, but we will also learn how to manipulate the world inside us. We will learn how to redesign our bodies and how to manipulate our emotions, our thoughts, and our sensations. But because we are very far from understanding the complexity of our internal system, especially our mental system, we might again misuse our power and balance our internal system. So we will have not just an external ecological crisis to deal with, but simultaneously an internal mental crisis to deal with. In particular, the danger is that governments and corporations and armies are likely to use the new technologies in order to enhance human skills that they need, like intelligence and discipline, while neglecting other human skills that they value less, like compassion or like spirituality. So the result will be very intelligent and disciplined humans who lack compassion, lack spiritual depth, and maybe lack mental balance. We could lose a large part of our human potential without even realizing that we had it. And if this happens, technology will not upgrade humans, it will downgrade them. We might face even more immediate problems on the social level. The last time we had a big technological revolution, the Industrial Revolution of the 19th century, this revolution resulted in the creation of a massive new class, the urban working class, the proletariat. And much of the history of the 19th and 20th century revolved around this new working class. The new revolution of the 21st century, the AI revolution, might also result in the emergence of a massive new class, the unworking class, the useless class. People who are useless, not from the viewpoint of their mother or siblings or children. Nobody is ever useless from the viewpoint of their loved ones, but people who are useless from the viewpoint of the economic and political system. Now, nobody knows for sure what the job market will actually look like in 2050, except that it will be very different from today. AI and robotics are likely to change almost every profession. Many jobs, if not most jobs, that people do today might disappear by 2050. Of course, as all jobs disappear, new jobs will emerge. But we don't know if enough new jobs will be created. And an even bigger problem will be to retrain people fast enough to fill the new job. Suppose you're a 40-year-old truck driver and you lost your job to a self-driving vehicle. Now, there is a new job, maybe in designing software, maybe in teaching yoga, to teach yoga to all these software engineers that sit all day in the office. But how does a 40-year-old truck driver reinvent himself as a yoga teacher or as a software engineer? You need to learn a lot of new skills, and in some cases even change your personality. And even if somehow you make the effort and you manage to reinvent yourself and retrain yourself, this will not be a long-term solution. Because one of the most important things to realize about the automation revolution is that the automation revolution, the rise of AI, will not be a single watershed event following which the job market and the economy will just settle down into a new equilibrium. It's not that in 2025 we will have the big AI revolution, lots of jobs disappear, new jobs emerge, you have a couple of rough years, and eventually things settle down again. No. The automation revolution will be a cascade of ever bigger disruptions because AI is nowhere near its full potential. It's just beginning. We will have a major revolution by 2025, but an even bigger one by 2035, an even bigger one by 2045. All jobs will disappear, new jobs will emerge, but very quickly the new jobs will also change and vanish. So to stay in the game, to stay relevant, people will have to retrain and reinvent themselves, not just once, but many, many times. If you somehow make the transition from truck driver to yoga teacher, 10 years later, you need to do it again because by then, computers equipped with biometric sensors might be able to teach yoga better than most human teachers. Now, governments will probably have to step in and help people during the difficult transition period to pay for them for unemployment and for the retraining courses. But even this will not deal with the biggest problem of all, which is likely to be psychological. Even if you have the necessary financial support to reinvent yourself at 50 and at 60 and at 70, the big question is whether you will have the mental resilience. Change is always very stressful. And reinventing yourself many times during your life, at 40, at 50, at 60, and so forth, might just be too difficult mentally for many people. And because of the rise in life expectancy, the age of retirement might simultaneously be pushed up to 70 or 80 or even 90. So even if new jobs will emerge, by 2050, we might nevertheless see the creation of this massive new class, the useless class. And whereas in the 20th century, people had to struggle against exploitation, this was the big conflict, people fighting against being exploited. In the 21st century, the biggest struggle of many people might be against irrelevance. You are not being exploited, you are just irrelevant. And this is far, far worse situation to be in. Finally, there is also a huge danger, a huge threat on the political level, which is the rise of digital dictatorships. The new technologies might tempt various governments across the world to build unprecedented totalitarian regimes that will monitor and control everyone all the time. We have seen one wave of totalitarian regimes in the mid-20th century with Hitler and Stalin and Mao, which eventually receded, and most people came to live in much more free societies. But we might now see another wave of totalitarian regimes, which will be far worse than anything we've seen in the 20th century. Because the new totalitarian regimes will have a new technology which was unavailable to Hitler and Stalin and Mao. They might have the technology to hack human beings. There is a lot of talk these days about hacking emails and hacking smartphones and bank accounts and so forth. But the really big change, the really big revolution is the ability to hack human beings. Now, what do you need in order to hack a human being? You need three things. You need a good understanding of biology, especially brain science. You need a lot of data, especially personal data. And you need a lot of computing power. Now, in the past, in the days of Hitler and Stalin, nobody understood biology well enough. And nobody had enough data and computing power to hack human beings on a massive scale. So even if the KGB or the Gestapo followed you around 24 hours a day, they could not know what was actually happening inside your brain. They could not understand your feelings. They could not really predict your choices and manipulate your desires effectively. But soon, corporations and governments might have enough understanding of biology, enough data, and enough computing power to hack humans. To hack humans means to know you better than you know yourself, and therefore be able to understand your feelings, predict your choices, and manipulate your desires. Now, this power to hack human beings can, of course, be used for good purposes. It can be used to provide the best healthcare in history. It can be used to advise people how to make better decisions in their career, in their personal lives. But it can also be used for bad purposes, for terrible purposes. It can be used to create extreme totalitarian regimes in which all the power is concentrated in the hands of the government or of a small elite, which might not care about anybody else, but which nobody can oppose. Because if you even start thinking about opposing it, they already know it, because they can tell what you're thinking. Of course, this is not inevitable. This is not a prophecy. Everything I talked about here about the future, none of that is a prophecy. They are just possibilities. Technology is never deterministic. You can use the same technology to create very different kinds of social and political systems. We saw this in the 20th century when the technology of the Industrial Revolution, electricity, trains, radio, and so forth, could be used to create communist dictatorships or fascist regimes or liberal democracies. The trains did not tell you what to do with them. It's the same in the 21st century. And you can see the differences between different societies, even from outer space, like here in this very famous image taken from outer space of East Asia at night. You see at the bottom right corner, South Korea as a sea of light. You see at the upper left corner, China as another sea of light. And in the middle, you see North Korea as a dark patch. This is not the ocean, it's North Korea. And the difference between North Korea and South Korea is not technological. They have access to the same technology. The North Koreans also know about electricity, but they chose to do with it very different things than the South Koreans. So technology gives us a choice, but ultimately the decision is in the hands of humans. In the 21st century, AI and biotechnology will definitely transform the world, but we can use them to create very different kinds of societies. I focused in my talk here on the more dangerous scenarios, mainly because people in private industry and in research tend to focus on the positive scenarios. And also because the dangerous possibilities are the possibilities we should be most aware of. But there are different possibilities, and it's up to us. And if you're afraid of some of the possibilities that I've outlined in this talk, you can still do something about it. Now, to be effective, whatever we do must be done on a global level. We need global cooperation on these issues. The three challenges that I've mentioned, nuclear war, climate change, technological disruption, they are global challenges in their very nature. And they cannot be solved by any single government or by any single nation. No nation can build a wall on its border against climate change or against nuclear war. And no nation can regulate AI or biotechnology by itself, because no government controls all the scientists and engineers in the world. And very few countries will be willing to limit their own technological development unless other countries do the same. India, for example, can say that genetic engineering is a very dangerous technology, and we ban genetic engineering of humans. But this will not prevent the Chinese or the Russians or the Americans of using this technology, because the Indian government has no control over Chinese or American scientists. And if they do it, then very soon the Indian government will say, well, we cannot stay behind and allow them to control the world with this technology. We must also do it. So if you're afraid of the consequences of genetic engineering and you think that it needs to be regulated, it should be very obvious to you that it can only be done through global cooperation. So whenever a leader says something like, my country first, or only my country is important, we should ask that leader, how can your country by itself prevent nuclear war, stop climate change, and regulate disruptive technologies? Now, nationalism still has an important and positive role to play in the 21st century. But if nationalism means protecting the safety and prosperity of people in your nation, then to be a good nationalist now requires that you will also be a globalist. There is no contradiction between the two. In the 21st century, nationalists should be globalists, because the only way to ensure the safety and prosperity of people in one nation is by cooperating with people in other nations. So if you take away from this talk just a single lesson, I think the most important lesson is that our global problems demand global solutions. Thank you.